Hello, everybody. This is Nick DeTiro, Professor of Information Technologies and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. Let's talk steganography. Basically, steganography, the core concept is hiding or embedding something, a file, text, whatever, into another file. And there's several approaches they can do to do this. Now, it can be a little tricky to detect. Especially if somebody maybe is transporting malware in one of these hidden files. But usually what happens with malware is once you remove the hidden file from the known file, the malware protection should catch it. But this is another avenue in which bad actors can either send secret messages, send inappropriate content, or send malware. So before we actually do a quick little demonstration of steganography using my Kali machine, I want to explain some basic techniques associated with hiding text. Probably one of the earliest techniques is how computers save data. They save it based upon blocks and block sectors, and oftentimes there is leftover bytes associated with how much was saved, etc. We're not going to really go into that, but basically some of the older techniques was to just take that leftover slack bytes that were available and place the data in there. Another approach that was early on was really to just append the second file to the first file. Now that was very easy to detect. The file grew exponentially or very, very large. So it was easy to determine. You'll still see that occasionally, but those particular techniques in which they're just appending the file to another file, those are easily thwarted by some kind of malware protection software. Where things got interesting is in a couple techniques. Now, one of the better techniques is this kind of falling out of the wayside because it's easily detected now, is what they refer to as least significant bit, BIT. And I'm going to do some demonstrations on that in a second. The other one, which is now taking more gain, is through the use of what they call graph theory. And I'm going to be honest with you, it is some high level math associated with it, well beyond the scope of my knowledge base, and it's probably at the graduate level. So I'm more concerned with just kind of explaining a rudimentary understanding of this concept of called the least significant bit. Now, before we get started, there's a couple caveats. One, you have the file, the cover file. That is the file then which you're going to embed something into it. So that's what they refer to as the cover file. Now, the cover file needs to be big. And it needs to be that if something changes in it, it will not adversely affect that particular file, or it won't change it so drastically that it's easily caught. So therefore, the cover files are usually JPEG files, image files, WAV files, even they're slowly getting into video files, because those files have something in common. They tend to be very big. And if you think about an image file, it can be very big, and the slight change should not adversely affect the file, and a slight change isn't going to be very noticeable. So by the end of my little demonstration here, you'll see why maybe that little slight change isn't going to be very noticeable. So let's go up to my machine. All right, first of all, I am looking at an Excel spreadsheet. What I did, there are some tools that will allow me to take an image. That's this little image of my Godzilla here. And it basically allows me to digitize that image. And it allows me to kind of turn this into almost like a bitmap. And each one of these, if I was to zoom in on Godzilla here, my machine is very slow, but each little color here is, my machine is slow. Imagine it's one cell. And in that one cell, we shade it with a specific color. Because we have so many cells, it looks like it is a bitmap image, and fundamentally that's what it is. I wish my machine was just a little bit faster about this, but basically my machine, that picture of Godzilla is a pixelated picture of a Godzilla using, now you can begin to see it, using Excel as its spreadsheet. See if I can zoom in without causing too much mischief. I guess not. We'll give it a second. All right, when my machine hangs, I'm just going to pause it so you guys, and now you can begin to see the pixelation. Each one of those is a given cell. So if I was to click on any cell, had to give it a couple minutes for my machine to calm down a little bit here. But basically, if I click on any, you can barely see it right there, but I basically selected a single cell. And if I was to do a format on that cell, you can see that cell is filled with a given color pattern. And if I was to do a more color, and this is how images work. Each pixel, we hear that megapixel, millions of pixel. Each pixel is a specific color, and that color is represented by 3 bytes, BYT. 3 bytes. Each byte has a certain value associated with it, and then using the RGB color model, it gets mixed. So that particular cell here, we're looking at my screen here, that particular cell has a mix of red, green, and blue of 142, 137, 124, and then with a hex value associated with it. And if we were to look at a real image, this is almost exactly what we would see. Right? I'm just using an Excel spreadsheet because it allows me to fool around with it without having to deal with a hex editor or anything like that. So keep that in mind. Every single little pixel has 3 bytes associated with it. And the combination of those 3 bytes produce a color. And when you're dealing with many millions of pixels, you can see you have a lot of bytes to work with. Now, how do they embed or store stuff into this cover file? Well, I'm going to close this up. I'm going to go to a little demonstration here called least significant bit, BIT. Now, my Godzilla JPEG is 324,000 bytes, a little bit more than 324,000 bytes. So that's how many total bytes, but each pixel is going to be using up 3 bytes. Keep that in mind. So over here in this part of the screen, I basically chose one pixel and I said, what is the color representation of that pixel? And if I was to do a format here, just to show you, it's saying that particular shade of gray is made up of a RGB combination of 123, 121, 108. Those are decimal representation of a binary value. Again, the bits and the bits that are inside that byte. So we have all these bytes. We have basically 3 bytes of information for 1 pixel. Alrighty. Now, here's where the least significant bit comes into play. Over here is the original color. I didn't fool around with it at all, right? But now over here, I have a string called N. And I want to embed or put this string N into my cover file, into Godzilla, that it would not be noticed. So I'm going to end up using, a total of 9 bytes to do it. And you'll see why in a second. But 9 bytes, here's N. N's ASCII value is 1001110. Actually, there's a 0 in front of that. So it's 01001100. I'm just looking at this number right here. And I laid these numbers out right here just to show you what I'm doing. Now, here's the original value. Pay attention to the smallest value here, this least significant bit right there. You'll notice that I took 0, whatever was the last bit, BIT, I changed it to a 0. On this one, whatever was the last bit, I changed it to a 1. Whatever was the last bit, I changed it to 0. Here, 0, 1, 1, 1. and then here 1, 0, 1. I didn't, because I needed 8 bits, that's why I had to use 9 bytes. So a little slack there, but it's not a big deal. So I didn't have to do anything to the very last byte of this particular situation. Again, I'm trying to embed n into this value. Well, by making these changes, we'll just start with this one right here. So the original value here is this. So I had to flip that last bit from a 1 to a 0. This value here, I didn't have to do anything. So that kind of worked out for me. And this value here, I didn't do anything. So that worked out for me too. So for this to represent the 0, 1, 0, I only had to change the value right here. So I flipped the bit from a 1 to a 0. Good. And therefore, it changed the color. It changed the color from 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 108 to 1, 2, 2, 1, 2. And if you look right here, that color is indistinguishable to the human eye. I can send you this Excel spreadsheet, and there is no way the human eye is going to pick up the color differentiation by just that one little bit. And then I did the exact same thing here. I needed to flip the bit on that one. Didn't need to do anything on this one. And on this one, I needed to flip the bit. And again, it changed the color. These colors that are here are the new colors. These are the old colors. These are the original colors. These are the new colors. And again, it's indistinguishable to the human eye because we're just changing that last bit in this particular situation. And then finally, to finish off, to try to encode n here, didn't have to do anything here, had to flip the bit here, and didn't have to do anything here. But so I'm able to embed n by, if I look at the last bit of all 9 of these bytes, I can produce an n. By just looking at the last bit of all those bytes, I can produce an n. So I can embed the n here. And the more bytes I have, the more I can embed. Generally speaking, again, when we're using the least significant bit approach, it's an 8-to-1 ratio. You need 8 bytes for every byte you're trying to hide, because there's 8 bits to a byte. So you need 8 bytes because you're going to be flipping the least significant bit on those bytes to create 1 byte of information. And I did the same thing with the letter I. I was going to do my whole name, but I figured only first 2. The letter I right here, I had to flip the bit, didn't have to do anything, had to flip the bit, change the color. That color, that color, and that color are indistinguishable. You're not going to be able to tell. So here I was able to embed the I. If I was to look at the last bit of each of those bytes and just take the last bit of each of those bytes, I'd be able to create an entire byte that represents the I. Here's why these things are hard to discover, because if we're to put this information in the Slack bytes, the first example I talked about, those are easily caught. If I was to take the content and just append it to the cover, those are easy caught. Now we're getting into, your detection software has to be able to look at all those bytes. And there are some detection softwares out there. But this is going to be able to deliver a payload or deliver an image or deliver something, a secret, to the other individual. Now, just for conversation, just for demonstration purposes, this is least significant bit. What if I was to do a most significant bit? Again, this is not how it's done. This is just for demonstration purposes where I flip the most significant bit. It's not used just for demonstration purposes. And you can see by flipping the most significant bit, all of a sudden this becomes green, this becomes like a blue-green, and this becomes purple, right? So you can see why the least significant bit doesn't change that much. If I go back to least significant bit, there's no way. And you will see images come up that have other images embedded in them, and there is no difference between the two. They don't get darker, they don't get lighter, because you're just changing 1 pixel at a time, and the color differential in that 1 pixel is so small, the human eye is not going to pick it up. So let's do some demonstrations of how this the mechanics, the applied mechanics associated with this. So I'm going to go up to my Godzilla machine. All right, this is just a Kali Linux machine I use for demonstration purposes in different classes. And there's a utility that we can use in Kali Linux called Steghide. It's a fairly easier steganography program. It's command line driven. It's not overly sophisticated. Where it is a little sophisticated is it doesn't use least significant bit. It uses that graph theory. So not only does it hide the information, but it also encodes the information, or it encrypts the information into the thing. So it makes it a little bit harder to detect. We can deliver, or bad actors can deliver, a payload using this. And again, I'm going to do some demonstrations here. They can deliver a payload doing this, but once you extract it, a good antivirus software should be able to pick up anything that is malware or some kind of malware threat. So before I go here, let's take a look using graphical representation here. I have a series of files. I have my Godzilla JPEG, which the first Godzilla JPEG, just Godzilla JPEG, I'm going to leave alone. That's going to be my kind of my ruler where I'm going to measure things. Then I have Godzilla 01, Godzilla 02, and Godzilla 03. I'm going to start by embedding simple things. I have a couple files. I have a simple text file, and if I was to open up this text file, I typed the sentence, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Let's see how long it takes my machine. I shouldn't do this. My machine, if you look up here, my machine just takes too long. So let me pause this. And here's the little text file. It's going to save it on a byte by byte sequence. It's not going to save these as individual. Most of the time, it doesn't save these as individual letters in there. But I just want to show you a simple text file. Then I'm going to embed a JPEG into another JPEG. So I have a JPEG of two bear cubs. And then I'm going to take the bear cubs JPEG and I'm going to put it or cover it up with the Godzilla. Now, there's a reason I'm using bear cubs. We live in a very sad world. And if you're watching this in the forensics class, we talk about inappropriate pictures and sadly some inappropriate pictures associated with pedophilia. And one of the ways that they do train police officers and law enforcement agencies is they can't use live data. It's just too disturbing to practice on live data. So oftentimes they will pick something like a bear cub, where they can easily distinguish between a full-grown bear and a baby bear, a bear cub. So I'm following that pattern. So anyways, I have a JPEG of bear cubs. I have JPEGs of Godzilla. And there's our friend Godzilla. So we're going to be embedding a simple text file. We're going to be embedding a JPEG file. And finally, I'm going to embed another program. Close this up. I have a little program here. It's a meaningless program. It's actually the calculator program, and I've called it Really Nasty. It's meant to be pretending it's a malware, but it's just the calculator. So now let's go and let's individually embed these things into our base image or our cover image of Godzilla. Oops. Just so you... All right, this is what I have. I have 4 Godzilla files. This very, very first Godzilla file, that's our yardstick. That's where we're going to measure any changes to, so that's not going to change. So I have Godzilla 1, 2, and 3. They're at a value of, a little over 324,000 bytes. The hidden text is fairly small, 46 bytes. The Cubs JPEG is a little over 9,000 bytes. And then the really nasty virus that we're pretending that's a virus, that's a little bit bigger. Now, we can't, as silly as it may sound, just so to clarify this, I cannot embed a large file into a small file. The cover file needs to be big. It needs to be big enough that it would accomplish the embedding process. These aren't even close to being very large files. Things like WAV files can be huge. Things like raw image files can be huge. You know, if you're dealing with 12 megapixels, you're at 12 megabytes of information. And again, if you just keep in mind that little 8-to-1 ratio, basically you need about 8 bytes of information to hide 1 byte of information. It's a good yardstick to rule from. So let's start with my machine speeding up here. All right, sorry for the big giant cut there. My machine was just acting too slow, so I decided to shut everything down and just reboot. So we're back from where we started. All right, let's take a look at our, let's go down to our subdirectory that I'm doing my work in and just take a look at these files. Again, the Godzilla JPEG file, I'm just going to use that as my benchmark. That is the plain file that has nothing in it, and I'm going to see how the other files grow. The first thing I'm going to do, clear my screen, and the first thing I'm going to do is do the ls again so I know my files, and I'm going to say stag hide embed, and the embedding file is going to be, we're going to do hidden 01, and we're going to embed that into Godzilla 01 JPEG. So it's that simple little text file, was it 46 bytes to it, the quick brown fox, et cetera, et cetera. And let's embed that into Godzilla 01. Passphrase. Passphrase. Now, what the passphrase does, again, it just doesn't embed the stuff into the cover file, but it also encrypts the information. So it's really trying to hide that information. Give it a second. It's fairly fast. And if I look at those files now, 01 grew a little bit. Actually quite a bit, comparing that it's only 46 bytes, but it grew a lot by almost 30,000. That's because of the algorithm it's using. So it's not taking a byte by byte. It's using an appropriate algorithm. Now let's delete, actually remove, I'm in Linux. Let's remove hidden 01, right? So now it is gone. And let us embed the bear cubs. As I mentioned before, we use the bear cub analogy, unfortunately, when they're testing police officers and they're looking for very inappropriate material. They cannot use actual material. It's too disturbing and it's against the law. So what they will often do is use bear cubs because it's very distinguishable between a full-grown bear and a bear cub. So it's easy to say, okay, I found, when they're practicing, I found an image with bear cubs. We're going to assume that it's inappropriate material. So again, I'm going to do a stag hide. I'm going to embed into my embedded file. We're going to embed cubs 02 JPEG. The cover file is going to be Godzilla _2. Now this is going to take a little bit longer, not much longer though. It's going to take a little bit longer. Give it a passphrase. And believe it or not, it took about a half second longer. It took the JPEG cubs and embedded it into Godzilla 02. Now, I'm going to keep stressing this. The cover file, the file in which something's going to be embedded into, needs to be large. I cannot take if bear cubs or the cubs was a much bigger file, it won't allow me to embed that. So it has to be a bigger file. All right, let's take a look at this again. Things are growing. I'm going to remove cubs _02 JPEG. And clear the screen, do an ls.l, and you can see that Godzilla 2 expanded a little bit. Now, in proportion, it didn't expand as much as that little hidden. Yes, it's a little bit bigger, but we're taking bigger files and put it in there. So the algorithm must be pretty consistent based upon the size and the shape and what it's really doing. All right, let's embed a potential piece of malware. I have this little program called Really Nasty 03. It's the calculator program that I renamed, and we're going to pretend that it's malware. So we're going to embed that into Godzilla 03 JPEG. Give it a passphrase, because it's not just embedding, it's encrypting. Oh, passphrase didn't match. And there we go. And if we do an ls.l and we remove really nasty _3 exe, and if I clear my screen, I now just have those JPEG files. And if we do a comparison, even the Really Nasty, which was a much bigger program than the JPEG, it's not as big as embedding one JPEG into another. Again, it has to be something with the algorithm. This, again, let me repeat this. This does not use the least significant bit approach. It uses the graph theory approach, which is well beyond my potential understanding. I began to look at some of the journal articles associated with it. I'm going, nope, I'm not even going to scratch the surface here. Now, can we recover this information? We have to have a way that we can recover the information, or it's just simple. Remember, what they're trying to do is they're trying to hide the information in there and maybe circumvent or get around detection software. So even the malware that we embedded, chances of the malware software initially picking up are not going to be that great. It could potentially happen, but I don't have the malware to really do the demonstration here. Chances aren't going to be that great because the malware software would actually have to go into the code and figure out all the little things that would be associated with it. However, once they de-encrypt it, de-encryption is not the right, once they pull it out or de-embed it, extract it, the malware should pick it up fairly quickly. You won't see that on my screen because this is a virtual machine, but if it's in a real environment, once the extraction is done, the malware software, good malware software is going to pull it and say, no, not going to allow that to happen. So now let's extract this information. We're going to start with the very first one, the hidden file. Passphrase. It extracted it fairly quickly, and there's the hidden file there. So we're able to get it. Let's clear the screen. Let's do it again. Let's do a steg hide extract. Spell the word steg. Passphrase. Give it a second. Found it. Yep, so we were able to extract the bear cubs. And let's extract the last one. Passphrase didn't match. It extracted it. Now, you'll notice, let me get it to the top of my screen here. You'll notice that these three files, Godzilla 1, 2, and 3, even after we extracted them, they did not go back to the original file. The embedded code is still in there. The embedded files are still in there. So they're kind of stuck. They're merged. Let's take a look at those files and because they're JPEG files, the Godzilla 0, 1, 2, and 3 are JPEG files. Was there anything to the discernible eye? Could I tell if they really got changed. So let's go to one. Let's open it up, give it a second. And I'm sorry, I know it's kind of a grayscale. It's really a colored picture, but it's using grayscale. It's hard to, there's no way. If I was to look at this photo, this image, there's no way I can tell that there's something else in this image. Same thing with the second one, here, second one, not going to be able to tell. Third one, and remember, 1, 2, and 3 still have the stuff embedded in them. So let's do a recap. Steganography is the hiding or embedding of information into a file. There's several different approaches they can use. Some of the earlier approaches was just to append the two files together. And in reality, you still see that. It was a very common practice in the old Unix days. Not so much for steganography, just kind of, it was before zippings and some other thing. You actually see programs appending together. The other one, the early ones were to hide the information in slack bytes, the leftover free space on a hard disk or in a file size that's not being really used. It can hide in there. Least significant bit was probably the more predominant one for many, many years, where we just kind of flipped that 0 and 1. That required very, very large files to do. It needed JPEGs, it needed WAV files. People often ask, could you embed this information into like a Word document or Excel document? No, because you're fundamentally changing the content. You're probably going to corrupt it. If you flip even the least significant bit on a Word file, you got a good chance of changing a word in there. You're changing a character. But when you're dealing with a JPEG or you're dealing with a WAV file, you're not changing anything that people, the eye is going to potentially pick up. So it is restricted. It is restricted to these very large JPEGs. Now there is technology in which the things are getting embedded in streaming technology. So say you're going to a streaming service, people are sharing this stuff or hiding this stuff in streaming services. They're looking at video productions. StegHide won't support MP4. It won't support streaming or anything like that. It does support JPEG and WAV, which are pretty decent sized files, and again, for demonstration purposes. Finally, StegHide does not use least significant bit. It uses a graph theory, which, believe me, it's well beyond my potential scope. It's definitely math, grad school level math and things like that. And I am not going to go down that path. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And this is, again, another way of just hiding information, getting around and circumventing. Ways to detect it is obviously having the appropriate malware. There is some detection software. I've never had great success with it. Maybe someday I'll produce a video where I'm quite successful with it. Let me wrap it up with a real quick story of myself. I don't use this stuff. I don't use steganography. There's no reason for me. There's no reason. I'm not hiding anything from you. There's nothing I'm keeping secret. Anything I keep secret, I'm just going to encrypt anyways. But I was, for lack of a better word, a victim of it. Oh God, about 10, 15 years ago, I downloaded an image from the internet for a PowerPoint presentation. And within about 5-10 minutes of me downloading that image, the malware didn't pick up anything, did not pick up anything. About 5-10 minutes, and I was flipping through the image. All of a sudden, the image flipped on me, and a very, very inappropriate picture came on board. Fortunately, it wasn't an illegal picture. It was just pornography. It was adult pornography. I contacted the help desk. I contacted the campus police, and I said, this is what happened. Here's the image that I pulled down, and I removed it from my desk. If it was truly inappropriate or illegal, children or something like that, then it's a very serious, very, very serious offense. But that's what I had to do. So the stuff is out there. I don't use it, but occasionally something will come across downloading images, and now with WAV files, and now with MP3 files. So hope you enjoyed the video. With that being said, let's go and learn something.